I've selected several games. One of the games that I have tonight to show you guys is a game that recently Magnus Carlsen played a couple of months ago. And during the game, he was playing against this English Grandmaster, Gwaine Jones, who has won British championships several times. He blundered a piece during the game. He overlooked a move, and he lost a piece. When you lose a piece against a Grandmaster, even one tier lower than you, there's an excellent chance you would lose the game. A piece is just a lot. So he somehow was able to swindle his opponent and win the game. So it's interesting to see this. That's why Magnus Carlsen is such a genius. He was white and he opened with e4. He plays d4 every now and then also, but most of the times he plays e4. Gwaine Jones plays c5. As you know, e4 is a kingside attacking oriented opening. All the ferocious attacking players in history, they love to open with e4. Like Bobby Fischer, all his life he played e4. Tal, Kasparov, Shirov, all these guys, they love to open with e4. And when they were black and somebody played e4 against them, invariably they played Sicilian. So Sicilian is a great counter-attacking line by black. So the game continued, knight f3, d6. So it's an open Sicilian, d4, pawn takes, and knight takes. Knight f6, knight c3. These are all the standard moves. There are usually 2-3 branches at this time that black could play. The most popular line these days is called the Najdorf or Najdorf variation. In this game, Gwaine Jones played g6. What's the name of this particular variation of Sicilian?
Dragon.
Dragon. Why is it called dragon? Do you know, Sarah?
Yeah, because the pieces look like a dragon.
These pawns, they look like a dragon. They're like a snake, right? Here's the tail, and here's the head. Also, there are some stars in a space called constellation, dragon constellation. Those stars, they also look like a snake. So they call them dragon constellation. Okay, one of the best lines against dragon is what's called Yugoslav attack. So white played bishop e3, standard stuff. And the correct move is bishop g7. Recently, one of our club experts who thinks he's a strong player, he played knight g4 here against one of our club prodigies who happens to be in the audience tonight. No, it's not Mitch.
He didn't play knight g4. He played bishop g7.
You play bishop g7 first?
Play bishop g7, bishop c4 first.
Right. Bishop g7, bishop c4, and then played knight g4, which is a mistake. This move is outright blunder. Who can tell me why?
Looks like bishop takes f7. That knight.
You don't have a knight check after that.
A check, no?
So
The white bishop a check.
white bishop gives a check where?
B5.
b5. This is the refutation of knight g4 question mark. What can black do? Knight d7 or bishop d7 means this knight will no longer have any defense, and white plays queen takes knight. So knight on c6 fails to knight takes c6, pawn takes bishop check, and black loses the rook. So black's lesser evil choice here is king f8. And if your king ends up not castling, you're going to be at least 5-6 moves down in the game. So just something FYI, that why knight g4 is not a good move. So in this game, after bishop e3, bishop g7, f3, see f3 prevents that knight harassment. Knight c6, these are all standard correct move. Queen d2. And black castled. So far so good. One of the most ferocious attacking lines by white at this point is what's called Yugoslav variation, which starts with bishop c4. The alternative to that move is to castle long, which is what white did, Carlsen. He castled long, and I should say that British players are very good with dragon variation. So many of them, they play this over years. So the only drawback, if you would call it, to castling long instead of bishop c4 is that black is able to play d5 exclam right now.
Doesn't that lead to an inferior endgame?
No, if black knows what he's doing, it's okay. Black gets a lot of counterattacking lines. It's one of the very heavily analyzed variations in chess. So now white is trying to prove that d5 is not good. The usual continuation is knight takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, knight takes, queen take, and white is a pawn up. But trouble with that line is that b and c files would be half open. Half open file is a file that only one side has a pawn in it, and black will manage to put the majors on the b and c files and attack white for the rest of the game, especially with this dragon bishop lurking back there.
Actually, after queen takes d5, I think the line is queen c7.
Right.
And then you play queen a8, bishop f5, queen f8, king f8.
Right.
And then you have
So
d2.
he will have counterattack for the pawn that he is sacrificing. Black will have counterattack. But in this game, Carlsen played a different move. He played queen e1. Of course, this prevents pawn takes pawn because it fails to knight takes knight, exposing the queen two ways. So black played e5. So white played knight takes c6. Black played pawn takes d5, pawn takes. Oh, sorry. Black took with the knight in order to guard the e-pawn. So drawback of taking with the knight is that now black has 3 pawn islands. Pawn islands are a cluster of pawns next to each other in the adjacent files. So here's 1 for black, here's 2, here's 3. For white, has a nicer pawn structure, 1, 2 pawn islands. Usually the fewer the better. So it's white to play, and Carlsen played bishop c4. It's a reasonable move, no mistake yet. And black, of course, had to defend the knight 3 times. So played bishop e6. So far, so good. White played king b1. Often when you castle long, you move the king one more file closer to the corner of the board because sooner or later you will get a check on this diagonal. So it's a good safe move. It's black to play, and black played rook e8. These are just the typical opening moves. If you see an opening reference book, you'll find these moves recommended by both sides. So here white played knight e4. He's trying to take advantage of this pin, rook to the queen, and put his pieces in good squares. As you know, we have 2 types of pin in chess, absolute and relative. Absolute, when the piece that is pinned is pinned against the king. That means absolutely the piece cannot move. Relative, the piece can move. It's legal. It just, you lose a higher value piece. So on knight e4, black played f5. And white played knight g5. And black played bishop c8, trying to preserve the bishop. So Carlsen's next move was an outright blunder. By the way, it is white to play, but let's assume it's black's. If it were black to play, what would have been the winning move here?
Knight takes bishop.
f4.
Knight takes, there is no knight takes bishop.
Knight, well, that's right. You would lose the queen.
White to, if it were black to play, knight takes doesn't work because of rook takes queen.
F4.
So what's a good move for black?
Pawn f4.
f4. What's the tactical theme behind this idea?
Remove the guard.
This is one of the 15 minor tactical themes in chess. It's called interference. This bishop is no longer defending the knight that is under attack with the queen. And the pawn itself is attacking this bishop. So, but it's white to play. And Carlsen, world champion, he just completely forgot about f4 move. He played g4, and sure enough, when the guy played f4, I'm not going to repeat what he said, but he didn't like that move. So it's white to play. The way Carlsen played from this point to the end of the game is the focus of our lecture tonight. Carlsen is clearly going to lose a piece. And at Super GM, where these guys are, losing a piece is definitely means losing the game. So he's trying to make the best of a very difficult, or rather, losing position. The main thing is not to panic. Just stay cool and make the best that you can in that position. So it's white to play, and white played h4. He's trying to preserve that bishop, that knight, plus that if it ever gets kicked, he can always find a fantastic square on e4. And sure enough, black took the bishop, takes, and white took with the queen. So this knight is pinned which way?
Absolute pin.
Absolute and relative. Absolute because again it's pinned against the king, and relative against the queen. So it absolutely cannot move.
So knight takes e3 earlier wouldn't have worked because bishop takes d8.
Right. So it's black to play. Knight is the trickiest piece on the chessboard. If it ever comes to your half of the board, make sure you kick it away. So far black hasn't done anything wrong here. Queen c5. And from this point on, you'll see that Carlsen bamboozling his opponent. Carlsen played queen c5. Yes, the knight is under attack, but if you can help it, one of the best ways to defend the position is through some kind of a counterattack. Of course, if black takes the knight, white would play rook takes, pawn takes, bishop check, followed by picking up that rook. So black played bishop b7, guarding the knight one more time. And white has to move the knight now, move that to e4. So it's black to play. Black wants to repair his position and make the best that he has. By the way, what's black's compensation? What's white's compensation for the piece that is down?
Pawn and a pinned piece.
He is down a pawn and a piece. There was an interesting comment that Anish Giri, one of our super GMs, made after this game. He said the world champion is officially a whole piece ahead from the rest of the world. That means he is one piece better than the rest of the world, anybody else. If you can beat a super GM with a piece down, that means a lot. So black played rook e6. So it's interesting how Carlsen from this point on is trying to outplay the guy. I'm not a big fan of this move right now. Yes, it avoids the pin, but I would have preferred black play some other move instead of this move.
Was queen b6 maybe better?
Queen b6 is interesting move. I was looking at that move also. Would queen here work?
I don't think so. Queen takes, pawn takes, knight d6, rook e7, knight takes.
Queen takes, pawn takes, knight d6, rook moves somewhere, defending the bishop. Knight takes bishop, rook takes, rook takes knight, winning for white. Did everybody follow? So the biggest drawback to queen b6, which looks like one of the plausible moves, is that the queen is no longer defending this knight. So white trades queens, and of course black has to take with the pawn because knight is pinned. And after take here, knight forks, rook and bishop. Say rook e7, knight takes bishop, takes, rook takes knight. That's the final shot, nice shot. Taking advantage of the two rooks on this diagonal. And of course, if rook takes, check, and picking up the rook, and white wins a piece. So, in the game, black played rook e6. So white is trying to make the most of this position. How should white continue? On g5, there's a good chance black will lock things up by playing h5. So white played h5. looks like black can still lock things up by playing g5. The problem is g5 weakens this square, and knight g3, knight here might be coming. So when white played g5, black decided to take. Black played h takes g5. Okay. Of course, white doesn't want to play pawn takes pawn because he will have no attack along the h file anymore. He may have to play rook g1 and attack along this file. But white actually doesn't mind if black plays pawn takes pawn, and then rook g1 and be attacking the g and h files. So here Carlsen made an interesting move, queen a3. What's the point of this move?
I guess when the pawn takes back from the F rank, he can swing the queen over to the king side.
That's one idea, but the main threat might be knight c5 next, forking these two still. So black played rook b8, guarding the bishop, and white to play. Great players, before they go on an attack, make sure their king is safe. So most people here, they probably would play bishop b3, closing this file, threatening rook takes pawn, queen takes pawn, and looks perfectly reasonable move. But Carlsen played pawn b3. His bishop is well placed for now, and the bishop, thanks to this rook and king on that diagonal, chances are this knight is not going to move anytime soon. So black played sorry, I skipped a move. After queen c5, bb7, knight e4, rook e6. On h5, black played queen b6. Okay. Of course.
Queen a3 does make sense.
Right. So on queen b6, it's white to play. What do you think he should do?
Well, he didn't want to trade queens.
Well, he want to make a situation where it would be impossible for black to trade queens. So he create a nice tactical shot here with g5. Now, of course, queen takes. Queen fails, the knight takes, forking the rook and a bishop, rook going back, guarding the bishop, takes, and with the same combination that we talked about. Rook takes. So on g5, black played h takes g5. And knight where?
C3.
Knight c3.
You get a check, and he can save the rook.
The rook would be checked.
Okay, and after knight c3, king a1.
So that you still have the piece.
Black resigns.
Very good. All right. So notwithstanding Trey's comment,
It was actually his.
after g to hg, white played queen e3. So black is not in a good situation right now. The h file will be forced open, and knight takes g5 is a threat. It's very important that when you're trying to attack, to avoid trading queens. Trading in general, but specifically and especially queens. Queen is your best attacking piece. So it's black to play rook b8. Black is hoping to cause some accident along the b file. And it's now that white played b3. Before you embark on anything, whether it works or not, make sure that your king is safe. So black moved the queen back to d8 to guard the knight one more time. And white now played queen takes a7. I've seen Carlsen in many games that either was drawish or difficult positions that he had, and he just kept grabbing pawns, and all of a sudden with some extra pawns he ended up drawing or winning games. So he's embarking on that idea again here too. So now he is a pawn up. From a pawn up piece that he was down a few moves ago, now he's a pawn up. So black played g takes h5. Black is trying to trade as many pieces as possible. Rook takes h5. and black to play, his g pawn is hanging. He play rook g6. So it's obvious that black is clearly in a defensive situation. So Carlsen is no longer defending, he's trying to play for a win. So there's a nice tactical shot at this point for white, based on a major tactical theme called overloading.
Oh,
Can you tell which black piece is overloaded here?
the queen.
The queen is guarding g5 and it's guarding this rook. So white played rook takes g5, and after rook takes, knight takes, black cannot take here because he loses the rook. So it's black to play now, and black played queen c8. Of course, there were a lot of improvements for black in this game, obviously, after he won the piece. Okay, white to play, what should he do? You could say this is a heavy middle game. You could say it's a heavy end game. So the most important factor is piece optimization. Put your pieces in best squares. Rook g1 directly in the same file as the black king. Makes perfect sense. Black to play, he can't stand this queen in his half of the board, so play rook a8. I went over this game a few times, and most people here in this position, maybe even myself included, they would play queen c5. Looks like a good safer square for the queen. But Carlsen deliberately played queen b6. He was kind of guessing what black will do against this move, and that's exactly what black did.
Move the king.
No, black played rook a6. It's a very tempting move, but in the long run, it will backfire. Obviously, white cannot take the rook because knight takes queen. And now he played queen c5. The point is, this rook is under direct fire of the bishop now. Now black played queen d7. So this bishop is so powerful that black doesn't mind giving up a rook for it. Now white could have easily played bishop takes, and of course black would have played bishop takes, and black would be resisting for a while. It's white to play, and he refused to take the rook. The only way that you refuse to win an exchange, which is rook for a minor piece, is to create a bigger threat, and that's what he did. Knight e4. Black does not have time to move this rook because of a serious threat. What's the threat? Knight f6. Both the bishop and the knight are absolute pinned, and black will lose his queen. So that's an example of what kind of fork?
Royal.
Royal fork. The royal family pieces are fork. So on knight e4, black has to move the king off the dangerous diagonal. King h8. You know it's a sad situation for a king when he walks into an open file, because he's going to get a check at the right opportunity. It's white to play. Again, he could have won the exchange, bishop takes, and normally it's a good move unless you create a bigger threat. So Carlsen played queen f2. What's the threat now?
H4.
Same threat. Queen h4 check, king g8, knight e4, winning the queen. So you see how black doesn't have time to save that rook? Black has to deal with white's numerous threats that he's creating. So black played queen e7 to guard against queen h4 check, and guarding the f6 square too. So
H2.
yeah, he can check on h2, but he goes to king g8, and there's nothing there to fall. King g8.
Queen b8. Check. Oh no, there's a pawn there.
Oh wait.
Well, how about rook takes bishop first?
Okay, so white kept creating threats, move after move, and black saw it and defended well. Now there's nothing else in this position for white as far as checkmating or forking threats. So now white decided to win the rook. Bishop takes, bishop takes. After a series of trades have taken place, that's a good idea to make an assessment of the position. So when you want to do an assessment of the position, you look at 5 factors in terms of importance. Anybody knows what those factors are? Material, number 1. Number 2,
Space.
the space, the final frontier. Number 3,
King safety.
king safety. Actually, it's mentioned as number 5, but because of its importance, it's really number 1. King safety is by far the most important of these factors. Pawn structure is another, and combinations or tactics is another. So let's look at the 5 factors and quickly come up with a plan here. Material. What's the material like here?
Well,
Black has 2 bishops for a rook,
right.
and
But
white has 2 pawns.
2 pawns also.
White has 2 pawns, so you could say white is actually a little bit ahead. So white has rook and 2 pawns for black's 2 bishops, 7 points to 6. But I would say tactically position is roughly equal. Okay, pawn structure. Black has 2 isolated pawns, 2 islands, and white has 2 also. Not a major factor. A space. The space is roughly equal. Each side's pieces are on their own half of the board, even though this knight is beautifully placed over here. Black has the bishop pair, but bishops are not active. One is hemmed in with his own pawn, doesn't have much scope at all on white's king. Another one attacking what we call airy nothing. It's a big open diagonal, but it's attacking nothing. There's no points of importance on that diagonal. So it's white that has actually, thanks to this rook, his threats are more serious. Okay, activity. White's activity seems to be more thanks to this open file against exposed black king. And of course, this knight is beautifully placed here. So when it comes to king safety, clearly white is better. And that makes the big difference in coming up with a plan. So white should just go for direct and immediate attack against the black king. This knight is beautifully placed here, but thanks to the knight over here, he doesn't have any squares around here. This bishop is not doing anything. So just direct attack on the king. So Carlsen started with queen h2 check, king g8 the only move, and queen h6. Queen got really close to the black king, but his real intention is to go around the king side, queen side, and grab pawns over here. See, when he takes this would be hanging. And it's obvious, actually. So black played queen a7. So he not only, he's attacking the white rook for now. It's white to play, and he can move the rook anytime, but it's best to optimize his position, his rook position before, his queen position before moving the rook. So played queen e6, black played king f8, and he played rook g5. So this is an example of defending and attacking at the same time. These are about the only situations in chess where I have no exceptions. All the rules of chess have exceptions, except the one that says you defend and attack at the same time. So he defended the rook against the capture by the queen, and also there's a serious threat in here, which wins the knight and the bishop for the rook, and plus that black king is still more exposed, there's a good chance black will lose the game. So on rook g5, black has to guard f5 square that rook is about to give a check. So black played knight e3. Of course, knight e3 only defends this square against.
Is it knight to d6 deadly?
Knight to where?
d6?
Knight. Well, right now, on knight d3, knight d6. Okay, on knight d6.
Well, the threat is e8.
Right. e8 and f7. Black has to guard both of these.
He's guarding f7 with the queen,
Okay.
but not e8.
Oh, yeah, queen e7 works.
Queen e7 works. Usually in a situation like this, you give a check here, and black has no good response. Trouble is, he doesn't have this. So queen e7 is what black would have played. That looks like a good response.
Isn't knight f6 better?
Isn't knight f6 better? Knight f6, and what do you do on queen f7, the only move?
Knight h7.
Knight h7, and after king g8.
Knight f6.
All right. Thanks for messing up the game again. So white needs to find something more concrete and more effective. After knight e3, it's white to play. White played queen d6 check. Okay, the obvious response is queen e7. And what's wrong with queen e7?
Rook takes g.
Queen takes, king takes, and picks up a bishop. So queen e7 is not possible. So black played king f7. It's white to play. He can take the pawn, but Carlsen is a very no-risk type of player. Tall, Fischer, Kasparov, everybody right now would have played rook takes pawn. And he figured queen and knight, they may create something, but it's not guaranteed. So white played knight c5, and now there are a lot of tactical niceties here. And what's the idea behind this move? There are multiple threats. Queen e6, king f8, knight check. So black defended that d7 is square, but then this gave rise to another tactical shot that white had. Can anybody figure out white to play and win from here, this position?
Well, it's queen g6 check.
You keep saying rook g7.
But what's wrong with that? Rook takes and then fork.
Well, every now and then he's right. Rook takes g7. He gives up a rook for a bishop, a knight, and a pawn. 7 points for 5. And black has nothing better to do, so black resigned. If he wanted to continue after king takes, queen takes e5, king somewhere, say f7, queen takes knight. So who's going to win this position? White is 3 pawns up.
Let me think about it.
3 pawns is a lot. So the guy didn't want to continue, totally frustrated that with a piece up against Magnus Carlsen could not win. That is frustrating.
White's